Coming to you from the West Coast, this is Politicos. Today's interview was recorded on November 3rd, 2017, and this is episode 60. In this bonus edition of Politicos, we'll be exploring what's happening in Alberta with special guest Stephen Carter, who joined us in Vancouver. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, where we're at PoliticosPod, and support the show at patreon.com/Politicos. Well, we're sitting down with Stephen Carter from The Strategists. Welcome back to Podcastopia.
Well, I love that you're still calling me Stephen Carter from The Strategists. Fond memories.
It's what everyone on Twitter calls you, right?
No, it's asshole.
Okay.
Yeah, you misunderstood my Twitter relationships.
So we want to talk about Alberta politics, and I think you're always up for that, right?
Oh, always, especially watching the complete collapse of anything vaguely resembling sanity in my home province. It's very exciting.
It's my home province too. And
yeah, well, there you go.
Apparently it's very polarized, as Karen McPherson has told us.
Yeah, I mean, it is polarized. I mean, there is a problem in politics right now. You're either with the NDP or you're with the UCP, the Conservatives. And the UCP, by creating that merger, have jumped over a whole bunch of cultural divides. The fear of the NDP destroying the province, I'm saying that sarcastically, is driving the combination of these two groups of people who just have different values. The Progressive Conservative Party just wasn't that conservative. It wasn't fiscally conservative, certainly for the last decade. We ran deficits during unbelievable boom years, but that's fine, right? I mean, what does conservative mean? But we weren't really that progressive either. We were just kind of interested in governing, and the Wild Rose Party was really, really conservative. They had these values, and sometimes we make fun of those values as though they don't matter, especially those of us that are kind of more progressive oriented. But they do matter to them, and that makes them legitimate. And now I'm just going to watch Jason Kenney, railroad the progressives, railroad the conservatives towards this far more Wild Rose style of government.
So maybe let's take a few steps back, because we just sort of jumped into the middle of everything there.
Right.
So
Did I? Yeah.
No, that was my fault, I
Shocking.
think. So about a year ago, maybe, I guess we have to go back to 2015. Rachel Notley wins, and the Progressive Conservatives kind of implode because Jim Prentice
stepped down before the votes were counted. Ian, doesn't that happen out here where your leader steps down before the votes are counted?
No, she waited till she lost her premiership officially.
Yeah. And all hopes of forming government.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but, when Jim Prentice stepped down on the night of the election, it sent a shockwave through the Progressive Conservatives, a party that was primarily interested in being together, in no small part because they were winning. It is easier to keep a coalition together when you're winning. It just is, and you can see that in municipal politics out here too, with your parties or nonpartisan parties or whatever the heck they are. When you're the one winning, it's easier to get people to run for it because they're just going to run because they want to win. And when Prentice stepped down, that was just the signal that wasn't going to work.
So you have then this desire, and their sort of thought on the right is, the reason we lost is because we were divided. They had the Wild Rose and Progressive. We just need to get them all back together. And that became Jason Kenney's mission for whatever reason, because he also had no more desire, I guess, to play federal politics because they lost there.
The federal politics, the party told him, we don't want you to be leader, Jason. Jason, you're an asshole. That seemed to be the clear message from the Conservative Party federally. Here's the thing, though. What if it turns out that it wasn't a vote split? What if it turns out that they lost the election for a different reason? And I mean, I hate the idea of vote split. Everybody starts with 0. No one starts with X and then you lose a few and you're down to whatever. You start with 0 and the person who gets the most votes wins. And I like that system. I don't like this proportional representation thing. Different topic. I'll park that over there. But the the voters had a choice. They knew they were going to vote against the PC party in Alberta. They weren't voting for anybody. They weren't voting for Rachel Notley. They weren't voting for Brian Jean. They certainly were never going to vote for Jim Prentice. And they chose Rachel Notley. Why? Why wouldn't they have chosen the right-wing party, Brian Jean, a federal politician who was very popular? He'd recently been elected a leader of the Wild Rose, but had no baggage as a result. He hadn't done anything wrong. And so why wouldn't he be the one that the provincial the people who were progressive conservatives before, they were progressive conservatives. They voted progressive conservative. They didn't go to the Wild Rose. They didn't. They could have chosen it. They didn't choose it, and that to me speaks volumes. It's not about the Conservatives chose. The Conservative vote splintered. It literally was there wasn't enough Conservative vote. When push came to shove, people were given the opportunity to identify as either a Conservative or a Progressive, and they chose to identify as a Progressive.
Well, does Jason Kenney have a for message that will resonate at all?
Right now it is, I'm not the NDP. And I just don't think that's enough. I think that I'm not the NDP is not why you vote for someone. I just, you look at the history of elections and electioneering simply to win. I mean, I guess someone would look at it and say, look at when the Reform Party came together with the Progressive Conservative Party federally, we were able to end, I don't remember how many years of horrible Liberal rule. Yeah, I guess, but they also took an extra election to get there. It wasn't until they figured out that they couldn't go and do the Reform style of campaigning. Remember Stephen Harper's last tour, was it 2004? Was the West wants in and the East went, fuck you. Yeah. Right? Then you don't understand this country yet. You're not ready to govern. And it wasn't until the next election that he was able to put a better campaign together where he understood the full country, that he was able to get that elected. So I suspect that the Conservatives are much the same way in Alberta. They're pretending or they think they understand all Albertans because they really have their finger on the pulse of Southern Albertans. But they don't really get all Albertans yet. They don't understand urban Alberta. That's for certain.
Well, and I've seen a lot of people argue, because I'm from Alberta, I know a lot of friends still there, that the Alberta Jason Kenney understands is the Alberta of the early 90s, the Alberta of 20, 30 years ago. And maybe those older generations he can win a lot of, but that level of obsession with balanced budgets and with social conservative issues and with parents' rights and these kind of things just isn't resonating.
It sounds an awful lot like Ralph Klein, 1993, right? 1993, Ralph Klein. So, and in fact, Jason Kenney will tell you ad nauseum that Ralph Klein was the best premier that we ever had. And my question to him is, which Ralph Klein? There's three Ralph Kleins. I won't talk about the third one, but the first Ralph Klein was the guy who came in 1993 and cut all the spending, and he said, "I will not blink," and we, held up the debt paid in full sign. Did all of it. You guys at home are missing out on my animations where I'm putting my hands up, but that Ralph Klein lasted until about 1998, and then somewhere around 2000 came a different Ralph Klein. And this Ralph Klein is the bane of every finance minister outside of Alberta. This is the guy who started spending money. And he raised our per capita spending to the highest in Canada. So which Ralph Klein do you like? The one who spent all the money or the one who saved all the money? Because you can't like them both. So, Jason Kenney, which one do you like? He likes 1993. He likes the guy who said, we're going to use the notwithstanding clause, to ensure that gays can't marry in our wonderful province of Alberta. That's the guy that Jason Kenney likes.
So we've already seen Jason Kenney win this race after winning the PC leadership race and winning the basically two campaigns in each party to merge. Now he's already decided he wants to run in a by-election in Calgary-Lougheed. Is that an easy win for him?
Ian,
and is he just bored of running?
Ian, you're betraying your British Columbia roots here. Lougheed. Lougheed in BC, Lougheed in Alberta.
Spent too much time here.
Yeah, I know. You've betrayed it. Jason Kenney getting into the legislature is essential. because Jason Kenney knows that he will be the best performer in the legislature. He will be a rock star in there. There is no one on the UCP bench that is nearly as good as him. Rick McIver, who'd been in politics forever, was the leader of the PCs, and he'll look like a child playing at politics, like one of these youth parliaments that we see all the time. Brian Jean's already said to, just put me as far back as possible. I might come once in a while. We'll see how it ends up. So Jason Kenney's going to be the guy who gets in there and tries to hold the NDP to account. The problem is he's going to do it using the bombast of Ottawa. And the bombast of Ottawa looks, I think you guys will find this in BC too. The bombast of Ottawa barely makes a ripple out here. Right? We're just not those people. We don't pay attention the same way.
Well, and the legislature is just not as big of a news story as the House of Commons.
Well, and
we'll hear a lot more about Scheer versus Trudeau than we will about... Who the fuck is filling in for the BC Liberals right now? That person.
Rich Coleman.
Rich Coleman. Yeah, of course.
How do I know that before you?
He just slips my mind because he hasn't been in the news.
Exactly. Exactly.
Organ.
And I think it's ironic because I think that provincial politics is far more important to every citizen's in real life. But it's dominated by these national figures, and you can play these games and then the media will follow you. I'll tell you that the media is not the same, and I'm sure it's in Victoria. It's the same. The media is not the same in Victoria as it is in Edmonton as it is in Ottawa. Ottawa is a different game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So why is Brian Jean kind of hanging back? I mean, he went from being one of the main figures in Alberta politics to taking a back seat.
Well,
was that his choice?
I believe it was his choice, but I believe but it's kind of like you've just had your part. Brian Jean is a decent man. Just fundamentally, he's a decent man. I don't agree with all of his politics, to be sure, but he's just a decent guy. I mean, and he's got a story. The story of Brian Jean is fascinating. I mean, he serves in Ottawa. His son gets sick and winds up passing away. He comes to Alberta politics. He's got a story about healthcare that I think that Albertans want to hear, need to hear. He gets 2 homes, I think, destroyed in the Fort McMurray fire. I mean, here's a guy who has experienced loss and suffering in a fashion that most people don't know. And then along comes Jason Kenney and takes his party. He takes away Brian Jean's party. Brian Jean didn't want this. Brian Jean thought he could be the next premier, and in many ways maybe could have. But Jason Kenney just steamrolled over everything. He took over riding associations. He took over boards. This is not the merger of 2 parties. This is the takeover and destruction of 2 parties that were then subjected to one another. It's a very different process.
Well, is the UCP going to basically become the Jason Kenney party, or is it going to have its own identity?
Well, and Jason Kenney has learned at the lap, at the seat beside Stephen Harper. Already the MLAs have been given their questions for question period. Don't tell us what you want. This is what you're going to ask. Already the member statements are being written up. Already they're being told how to behave. And to put this in perspective, much the same as the Reform Party was a grassroots party that Stephen Harper said, fuck you to the grassroots. Jason Kenney is taking over the Wild Rose, which was a grassroots party, and saying fuck you to the grassroots. And even the PC party, we had a nod at least towards it being a grassroots party. When it suited us. When it didn't suit us, we just ignored the grassroots.
Do you see that coming back to bite the UCP at any point? I mean, the modus operandi of the Wild Rose was their bozos being able to be exactly that. And now you have, I guess, Derek Fildebrandt kicked out of caucus after the 17th eruption. And
yeah, I mean, Fildebrandt will be back in caucus. So the bozo eruptions are really a problem for the UCP. And they're a problem for conservatives across the board. Now, I guess that you could argue they're just a problem for political parties. But they tend to be so much more interesting when a conservative does it, because they're out of step with the values question for many, many Canadians. So, conservatives are aligned with our values when they focus on financial issues. When they focus to social, they get out of alignment. And Jason Kenney is now basically putting the hammer down. And we're going to see something very interesting happen. The NDP aren't stupid. And they are bringing forward GSA legislation that essentially says to teachers, you can't disclose to parents who's in your GSA. I think it's reasonable. Albertans think it's reasonable. Jason Kenney opposes it. And there are people within Jason Kenney's caucus who support it. And shit gonna get real. So I'm excited about it. I'm looking forward to it, because there ain't nothing quite like a little bit of a social policy fight. And I think that this heavy-handedness may have consequences. You may see more. Already 2 MLAs have stepped out of the UCP caucus. You may see more step out before the end of this particular session, or at least before next year's session starts up.
So often when parties fracture or a new one kind of comes on, they try and go at it from the flanks. But from the sounds of it, it's almost going to be the centrists that are starting to pull away if they decide to kind of get a new party started or fight an insurgency. Is there really a spot for them?
Are they all going to join the Alberta Party?
The Alberta. I'm working on the Alberta Party.
So biased.
My disclosure. I think that the center is going to be interesting, but there's also people working on a right-wing party. Right? There are people who will say that the compromise that Jason Kenney is going to demand of us is not something that we can support. These families, these values don't fit together, right? And you may be able to hold them together for 1 term or 2 terms, but you can't hold them together for much longer than that. It's another reason why I just can't stand the idea of PR. It just we'll have the semi-racist party of the Okanagan before you can shake your head. It's just scary as all hell. We'll have that debate later. I know, Ian. I know. Keep it on topic. Sorry, Ian.
Well, bringing it back to what you mentioned about Rachel Notley bringing forward the GSA bills, even a couple of weeks ago, they were already starting to have, and I think this came right after the municipal elections, all the fracas around Catholic schools in the province, which are suddenly a hot topic again. We talked to David King, the former education minister, who's still trying to put forward his petition for a referendum to abolish them, but then
Dave King, our happy lunatic.
Yeah. And then I think it was the NDP dropped out leaked the proposed sex ed curriculum from the Catholic school principals that was, were
superintendents.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the superintendents, the people who run the Catholic schools, basically wanted to eliminate or change the sex education, moving away from, controversial topics like consent, birth control, things that are really tricky to get our quote unquote liberal society to buy into. My God, like the Catholics really hurt themselves with this one. They really did. And I think it opens up a really interesting conversation about what does separate schools look like in Canada right now. Other provinces have done away with the idea of a separate school. We are not a 2-religion monolith, or what is that? Not a monolith. The other opposite of monolith. Bipolar. Thank you.
We don't have a bipolar religious problem.
Yeah. Edit out the stupid bit. But we have all these different religions now, and we have to make some decisions. What is our education supposed to look like? And the Catholics open the door to having that conversation, because when the Catholics are simply the second school board, then what it is a huge number of what I call the agnostic Catholics. And to be honest, I meet very few practicing Catholics that have their kids, my age, their kids are in high school, and they put their kids into the Catholic high school. Why? Well, because it's closer, right? Or because it's got a little bit smaller class size, or it's an alternative program, not, I'm Catholic, you idiot. Of course I'm putting my kid in the Catholic school. So there's going to be a conversation in Alberta. And I think it's a conversation we need to have about what is the role of religious education, and do we want our public schools to flip it out even further? We have a tremendous number of homeschool students that are homeschooled in what can only be described as a crazy ass religious environment.
I was going to say unregulated, sort of free for all.
Well, it's regulated, but
yeah.
but we're supposed to be teaching the same curriculum. This is the foundation of our school systems. We set the curriculum. We decide what is important that all children should know by the time they graduate from high school. And each year there's benchmarks along the way. And we're not being particularly adherent to that particular model with certain subgroups. And the Catholics I think they're going to open the door for us to have that conversation. I certainly hope we do get to have that conversation.
I know it's always been something as a secularist that I've always wanted to see and would expect if any party would take it on, it'd be the NDP. But then you get the NDP in government, which is much different than NDP in opposition. NDP in government is, we're going to stay away from all of these questions. But just like any party, right? They're ambitious when they're third party or in distance place.
Let's talk about this for a minute. Let's talk about this not in terms just of NDP, but why are we running?
Yeah.
Why are we running at all? If when we run and win, we stop doing the things that we are supposed to believe in. Mm-hmm. The NDP have many, many principles that they're supposed to be doing that they aren't doing, right? What are they going to do? I met with a buddy of mine. You may have heard of him, Corey Hogan. Used to host the,
doesn't sound
Isn't
familiar.
he dead to the world?
Yeah, dead to the world. Fucking Corey Hogan. But hashtag fucking Corey Hogan. But my problem with the NDP isn't that they're the NDP. My problem with the NDP is that now they're in government, I can't tell. Right? If you're going to be the NDP, I mean, sure, everybody's screaming that you've destroyed the environment or you've destroyed the economic environment. I happen to believe that when you reduce oil to like $38, shit's going to go bad in Alberta. Mm-hmm. I'm not an expert. I'm not sure, but it seems to me that when we saw natural gas dip about 10 years ago, the gravy train was over. Take a look at the books. I can't be, I've only read the last 10 budgets because I am that geeky. It appears to be a pattern. That seems to be the pattern. Okay, NDP, get in there. Fix it. If we believe that spending on healthcare is sacrosanct, you are not going to touch it, then don't touch it. Great. Good. I'm with you. But what are you going to do to raise the revenue to pay for healthcare? If Alberta had British Columbia's tax system, we'd balance our budget.
You'd have like $10 billion extra a year or something ridiculous like that.
And we have a $10 billion deficit.
Yeah.
It is that easy. That easy. If we had Saskatchewan's tax level, balance the budget. It's that easy.
I love the progressive income tax they brought in. It was basically still the flat tax and then boop. 2 tiny little bumps at the top.
Boop. Right? And you're destroying the province. Taxes are too high. Right? Taxes are too high. Jason Kenney and Doug Schweitzer, when they ran for the UCP leadership, ran on, we will lower your taxes. Taxes are out of control in Alberta. When the NDP brought in the carbon tax, they made it mostly revenue neutral. I don't know what mostly revenue neutral is, but why? We don't have a sales tax, right? Why would you bring in essentially, a consumption, carbon-based consumption, but still a consumption tax, and make it revenue neutral? What are you trying to do here? If you believe that you got to maintain all the spending, then you have to play with the revenues. And they will not do that which they should be doing. And it's because they want to be reelected. And my view is, if you stuck to your principles, you probably would get reelected, because then people would say, like they did with Ralph Klein in 1993, here's a guy who told us what he was going to do, and then he did it. And what more do we want from our politicians than to actually do those things that they say they're going to do? Sorry, rant over.
No, it's good.
Little trademark Stephen Carter rant right there.
Well, the next election's coming up. What should the NDP be doing to try and hold on to what looks like a very tenuous grip on power?
Number one, they need to figure out Calgary. They figured out Edmonton. Edmonton's not that hard for them to hold those seats. Like British Columbia, regions matter, right? I'll go to Prince George for my kids' ski racing, and it's a little different than coming to the Lower Mainland. The people are different. The values are different. The Okanagan is different. There's crazy. There's different people all over British Columbia, and there's different people and different values all over Alberta. Calgary doesn't know what it is yet. It talks like a conservative and walks like a liberal, right? So what do you do with that, right? Because all the time you'll hear them say, so we do these polls all the time, and we do these tracking polls. And if you ask people, do you want to decrease spending or increase taxes? Decrease spending. Decrease spending wins like 80 to 20. 80 to 20. It's a massive thing. But when I ask them, what would you do with healthcare spending? Increase it or decrease it? On a 7-point Likert, it gets something like 6, where people will increase it, like massively increase it. Education is like a 5.5. Post-secondary is a 5.3. It goes all the way down to culture. Culture is the only thing that we are prepared as Albertans to cut, and there's like nothing there. There's like, oh, we cut culture. What did we save? Nothing. 10% out of culture, and you saved nothing. A rounding error in healthcare, right? But so that disconnect of how do we feel about a macro issue versus how do we behave on a micro issue is where the NDP need to focus. The NDP need to say, we are going to do these things in healthcare, education, post-secondary, and human services. We don't have your housing crisis, right? So
yeah, luckily.
Yet.
You have the opposite.
We used to.
Yeah, that's true. And the economy tanked.
Then you tanked the economy. So, recommendation to you guys, tank it. No problem.
It's what the Liberals think the NDP here is already doing.
Oh, it's already done.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the thing, right? You guys are already done. Yeah. You're screwed. But our economy's, going to grow 4%. Number one economy in Canada projected next year. It performed wonderfully last year. The growth is coming back, but it's still not enough for Jason Kenney.
Do you think there's enough time in there, though, for the NDP to take on some of this bigger projects to show where they will spend in Calgary? Or is it almost too late? Or do they just need to put the vision forward? This
is where Corey and I really disagree, right? Because Corey says, tons of time. And I'm looking at it going, hey, guys, I look at it and say you're out of runway, right? And now you have to do stupid things to kind of win people back, because some of these things aren't easy. It is so much easier in opposition. How will you pay for it? Who cares? I'm in opposition, right? And when you're in government, you have to try and figure out it. When Brian Mason and Rachel Notley, so Brian was the former leader of the Alberta New Democrats, Rachel Notley, obviously the current one, and they were a 2-person caucus from 2008 to 2012. And every day we'd go to the legislature and they'd ask about children's services. And they would have specific examples and they would crucify us. Just destroy us. Our government got destroyed on children's services. Now the government has been there for 30 months or something along those lines. And what have they done on children's services? Nothing. Turns out children's services is really hard. Really hard. We have to acknowledge that we've got problems all over the place. We have to acknowledge that 70% plus of our children in care are First Nations. And we have no plan, no concept, no idea. We just don't know how to fix it. Even, all the most well-meaning people in the world working together aren't going to fix that problem in 14 months. It's just not going to happen. It's too hard.
So if you were to advise the NDP to do something stupid to try and win, what would it be?
I always go to healthcare and education. So they just did something really populist and really stupid in education. They removed school fees for busing. Oh, man, that's a great idea. This reminds me of the NDP in British Columbia, removing the tolls off the Port Mann Bridge. Right? So the tolls come off your bridge, the busing fee is removed. What happens? We see problems with delivery now, right? So now in your case, you can't get over the damn bridge because there's a traffic jam. In our case, school boards can't afford the same number of buses anymore. So if you live within 100 miles, you now have to walk to school, right? Like it's ridiculous, and parents are losing their minds because now my grade 7 kid has to get on a public bus, which is unheard of, right? And the parents are losing their minds, right? I would have been far more interested if someone had said, going back to our Catholic conversation, why can't Catholics and non-Catholics get on the same school bus? Mm-hmm. Where does it say in our charter,
Constitution,
that you're not allowed to put Catholics and non-Catholics on the same school bus? The schools are side by side. They share the same playground. Why can't we share the same school bus? I think that would have been a far more interesting discussion that the NDP could have done. But instead, they did the populist thing, the shortcut to try and win over people's hearts and minds, and they fucked it up. That's the problem with shortcuts. They don't really work very well. You got to think it all the way through.
They help you win an election. You didn't really answer the question, though.
I'm a politician.
What should the NDP
What the fuck do you want from
me?
me?
No, you're the advisor, aren't you? You're the strategist. That's the name.
Yeah,
of the
but
card.
okay. So what would I do? I mean, I'd focus on healthcare.
Okay.
But I always focus on healthcare, right? We Alison Redford's campaign was all about healthcare. Mm-hmm. I think that there's, everybody always, Alberta, right? We're all about privatization. The doctors are all private. We lost, right? It's all private. And it's controlled by these private corporations, and that's the way it is. In Alberta, 1 out of every $10 of spending. Not 1 out of every $10 of healthcare spending. 1 out of every $10 of spending goes to a physician. Okay, that's our reality. And actually, it's more fun if you say a corporation controlled by a physician. It's even more fun. I'd take that on, right? Let's go have some fun. Right? Let's have some fun. Now, the problem is the doctors will lose their minds and you end up...
I was going to say, Trudeau and Morneau have something to tell you about how fun it is to take on doctors.
Well, I took on the doctors. They put $2 million into the 2012 campaign and I kicked their fucking asses, but we never took the pain out of them. In 2013, we should have taken them to task. Instead, because we won. And doctors, that's why we get to take you to task. Because we won. And we have, it's not even primary care physicians, right? The primary care physicians, although in Alberta, we have the highest paid primary care physicians and the highest per capita number of primary care physicians. It's the thing that happens when you economically incent them. But which is a different policy discussion. If you're going to do something in healthcare, you have to start talking about competition. And you have to start talking about what does comprehensive mean. Comprehensive is, anything medically necessary procedure is defined by a physician. I would defy you to explain to me why cleaning your teeth is in some fashion more comprehensive than or less comprehensive than replacing your hip. Someone has to explain that to me. I will pay $200,000 to replace your hip, but I won't pay, $48 to clean your teeth. Okay, it's more than $48, I know, but I don't understand it. Cleaning your teeth is directly related to your heart health, right? It is directly related to your whole gastrointestinal system.
Well, you have to explain that to Calgary that took fluoride out of its water.
Well,
what about the other parties then? So we've mentioned briefly the Alberta Party, and we can get into what they need to do, but there is technically still a Liberal Party of Alberta.
Is there?
I don't know. You tell me. And apparently there's a Green Party that's having a leadership race, but
I didn't even know that.
I saw it randomly yesterday.
I know, it was yesterday, and on November the 4th, the Green Party will choose their new leader. And I'm like, what? What's her name is stepping down?
What's her name?
Yeah, well, who knows, right?
Yeah.
The Liberals had a leadership recently, and a woman named Carrie Kundal ran against a gentleman named David Kahn. Both of those people are fine, upstanding people. But the good old Liberal Party... Carrie was on her way to winning, and they decided they didn't want all the memberships to be there. So Carrie lost, and Dave Kahn. If I was Dave Kahn, I would have said, I'm not taking this victory, but I'm not Dave Kahn. He's now the Liberal leader. He's in a nightmarish place with no budget, and David Swan is the sole MLA. The Alberta Party at least picked up an MLA. They picked up a tremendous number of members. They have an AGM coming that will have, how more people than the Liberals have seen for a number of years. Actually sold out yesterday. So it's moving. It's got some momentum. There is an open question as to whether or not the middle can form, right? In the time frame allowed. It may form, it may not form, and it may only form regionally. It may form in Calgary and that's and that's it, or it forms in Calgary and it forms in Grand Prairie, where the Alberta Party candidate came in second in the last election. There are pockets of people who are looking for a reasonable alternative. But it's going to be entirely dependent on how Jason Kenney behaves. If he opposes this GSA legislation, he's going to be off to a terrible start. And people don't like him. I don't know if you know this, but he's not very likable.
Is there any numbers out on that? Or is
it
just
it was massive. It's like 30% negative, 33% negative, something like that. A net negative of in the 30s.
Oh, okay.
And Brian Jean was like a net positive.
Yeah.
But this, so in a real leadership, that would have mattered. But this was a takeover.
This was a Kenney machine.
You know what? I crap on Jason all the time. I don't like him. I don't like the politics he does. His organizational skill is second to none. His abilities in the game, if he wasn't, pure evil, you'd have to look at him and say, wow, that's impressive. But he's Jason Kenney.
Well, quickly circling back to 2019, since you brought it up, how effective is that organizational ability going to be for him, and will he be able to leverage that?
Yeah, he will. At the end of the day, there's two types of campaigns, right? There's the campaign that uses the air war that gets people out to vote, and Alison Redford did that twice. We did that with her leadership, and then we did it in the 2012 election where we didn't have a ground game to get the vote out. We got the vote out because the voters wanted to come vote. And then there is the absolute brilliantly perfected ground and pound game of a well-executed, well-funded voter identification targeted and move them to the polls. And Jason and Rob Anders, a name that shouldn't exist or should never be spoken. They're excellent at segmentation, list management, and GeoTV. And they will do everything in their power to find an issue that will move you and then never speak to you about another issue. And he will avoid the media. He will avoid mass communications just to stay out of that problem. He's going to, if he wins, he doesn't win ever uttering a phrase. He wins by a subterranean, gross issue identification GeoTV.
Well, maybe let's switch gears and talk a little bit about the recent municipal elections in Alberta. Calgary saw what has been widely described as a nasty, ugly campaign that almost unseated Naheed Nenshi. Is that accurate?
Yeah, well, it's accurate. I mean, an incumbent mayor getting 51% in Calgary hasn't happened since 1980 when a guy named Ralph Klein actually beat the incumbent. And that was kind of a weird thing. It wasn't this style of race. It didn't have the two-person kind of angle to it. Massively unpopular incumbent. So Nenshi is a massively unpopular incumbent. And the worst part about that is he wasn't aware that he was an unpopular incumbent. And it appears to still be unaware that he's a massively unpopular incumbent. And it manifests itself in arrogance. What drove me crazy, I mean, even recently, so what is it today? The 3rd of November, 2nd of November?
3rd.
So a few days ago, it's Halloween. And this guy who has a brush with death almost gets defeated. If Keto Maggi had his way, would have been defeated. And Nenshi puts out a tweet saying, okay, sexy mayor costumes are a no-no. No one is going as a sexy mayor, Naheed Nenshi wearing purple. Okay, no one. You're not. No one is interested in that. You arrogant SOB. Right? Like, and I like Ned. He's a good guy. And he's super smart. But he's lost the ability to connect with the people. And ultimately, that's every politician's magic gift. Most of us go around and keep our heads down and don't look at the people we're passing on the street. And the politician demands that the people on the street look at them, right? That is the only way to be a successful politician. You've got to look at their eyes and ask them to shake your hand. I mean, when was the last time you walked up to a stranger unbidden and asked them to shake your hand? It's not something we do, not us normal people. But Naheed Nenshi needs them. He loves it when someone comes and takes a selfie with him, right? He's got his staffer. All his staffer does is take selfies all day, or pictures all the time, right? But no one's asking anymore. And what do you do when people stop asking? And that's where you got to go back to school. You got to relearn the game of politics. And the game of politics is making people like you. We elect people who we like, who we want to be like. And I think that ultimately that's going to be Jason Kenney's Achilles heel. He's not likable. So Naheed Nenshi needs to be reminded, and he should have gotten the message this time, we don't like you that much. Now go and become likable again. And if he does that, I think it's going to be an easier 4 years for him.
So given that lost touch, I guess, why couldn't Bill Smith close the deal? Maybe it's an easy question.
Well, I mean, Bill Smith's an interesting cat because he from the start of the campaign to the end of the campaign, he didn't appear to have a grasp of a single issue. Right? It wasn't like so we're building an LRT. It's called the Green Line. It starts in downtown, or just a little north of downtown, and makes its way down a little bit south of downtown. Now, the original idea of the Green Line was it would go all the way to our northern borders, all the way to our southern borders. It's a big LRT line. But it turns out that $4.4 billion doesn't quite cover that length of line. It costs about $9 billion to build that length of line. So we built a smaller one. No big deal. Bill Smith seemed to have no concept of why it cost that much money, or what would change if, you ran the line and stopped it before the downtown core. He didn't have any concept of it, and he didn't have a concept of it in the last 2 weeks of the campaign, when you should have gone to school and you should have learned it. Because in every debate, Naheed Nenshi and the people at the debate were like, oh, I hate the guy, but he really crushed it, right? He really knew the issues. He really knew what he was talking about. And Bill Smith never went to school, right? Never went to school, never figured it out. And I think that that's frustrating because, as a politician, Bill Smith was a provincial politician. He was president of a PC party. So not an elected, but elected by his members. And it's a different issue set. But you have to at least know some of the issues. You have to have some answers to the issues if you're going to be elected, and he had none. And the far more capable candidate was Chabot. He wound up with like a rounding error of votes. But he knew the issues, and he had a far more practical approach to the campaign. But Bill Smith just... If he'd learned, he would have won. If he'd taken the time to learn what the issues were, and instead of just simply saying taxes are too high. Taxes are high because we pay for roads. Taxes are high because we pay for LRT. That's why taxes are high. Oh, and poop flows downhill, water flows uphill. Those are pretty.
And everything else the Governor General said the other day.
Oh, why are people mad at the Governor General? I don't get it. She's right. She said the truth. She said the truth.
Yeah, we
this
already
protection of religion. This is a different podcast. This protection of the religious people in our country at the cost of ignorance the cost of ignorance. The price of ignorance is too high a price to pay for the respect of those who are religious.
It's not even just.
Sorry,
it's not the religious. It's
we completely agree.
Hyper corner of it.
Well, it's not even just the religious. It is the religious. It is the crazies that are with Trump. It is the price that we are paying right now with Twitter and Facebook. The freedom of speech. The price we are paying with freedom of speech is too high. Do we forget that we used to have editors? Did we forget that the publisher decided who he would put, or she would put, never she, but he would put into the newspaper? Can you call up CTV and say, hey, we got this great podcast. We're putting it on the air. We're gonna videotape this sucker. We're putting it up for 30 minutes on Fridays. Can you do that? You
Not
can't.
since public access is gone, but even then.
Even public access had a guy who said, never a girl. He had a guy who said, no, we're not putting you on the air. You're a lunatic. Right? And Twitter and Facebook and Google have said, fuck it. Everybody gets the same rights. Freedom of speech. Where's the responsibility? Where's the responsibility for publishing? That's what we should be focused on. Rant over. 2 rants. Oh, I'm okay.
I'm not
How
sure I
the
have
hell
a
did we
follow-up
wind
to
up
that.
there? Not your fault or my
A
fault.
bit of everyone.
Yeah.
I'll let it go.
I think it had to do with Bill Smith not knowing the issues, which I guess is a little
They let
reassuring
people
that he that still means you can lose a campaign these days. So it does feel like that's less and less of a drawback.
I mean, Alison Redford was really interesting for that because Alison had a superficial understanding of many issues. She had a deep understanding of issues that she cared about and a superficial understanding of issues that she should have cared about. So when we talked about primary healthcare reform, we have these things called primary care networks, which is essentially a wealth redistribution system for doctors, which is why we have the highest paid doctors. And she said, well, I'm not a member of the primary care network. And I said, I'll bet you $100 you're a member of a primary care network. So she calls and finds out she's a member of a primary care network. So what we find out, of course, is the doctor has been collecting $65 for her husband, and her daughter, and providing no additional services every year for about 8 years. Now, that's not a big deal. It's $1,000, whatever, right? Except you multiply it by the 3.5 million people in the province of Alberta. We created a no better healthcare system, but a perverse system of incenting doctors to sign people up. So she never understood that. She didn't understand why it happened, what had happened, but she at least took the time to learn the lines. She at least took the time to understand that the lines were important, and she learned the lines, and she knew she'd have a minister of health who'd be able to take care of that. And that's, at the very least, that's what we demand of our politicians. In becoming a mayor or a councillor, you don't get to assign the minister of health, right? You don't get to assign the minister of poop going downhill. There's an administration who takes care of it, but you literally must learn all of the different foundational pieces of running the city.
One of the things I think I saw people talking about, and I know a couple people who are on Edmonton School Board, and they were messaging me concerned about like candidates running against them. I'm like, what have you done wrong? And you're an incumbent school board trustee. No one knows who their school board trustees are other than vote for the people who are there because they probably know what they're doing. But other people referenced that there were sort of right-wing coordinated campaigns to take over city council in Calgary, take over city council in Edmonton, or run unofficial slates. Like you don't have your municipal political parties, but you have your political parties operating at the municipal level. Were they successful?
Yeah.
How, and what did that?
Well, we're gonna see it unfold. We had slates in Calgary get elected in the school board, and right-wing slates getting elected in the school board scares the shit out of me. The left wings, like the people, there's 3 out of 7 that were elected from one slate, and it just makes me nervous, right? Nahad Nenshi used to say, there's no right or left wing way to fill a pothole. And I think that the same should hold true with education. There's not a right or left wing way to provide education. Education is curriculums determined by the province. The province, it's then implemented and done by professional teachers. Stay the hell out of the way. Stay the hell out of the way. But I suspect that we're going to see some movement on some things. Sex ed will be one of them. And it will ultimately could result in our board putting themselves in the nasty position of maybe being fired. But I don't want to prejudge it too much. There is a misunderstanding of how much power a school board has. The school board's in the unenviable position of watching provincial governments dictate almost everything to them, how much revenue you get, and how much money you're allowed to spend. And it used to be, I don't know if it's the same here, but school boards used to be able to dictate how much revenue they got. They set the taxation levels. And that meant that if you wanted more money, you had to direct taxation relationship, increase their taxes, and then watch out whether or not people would accept that taxation increase. And if we didn't like it, we could unelect you. And that's been removed because the government has stepped in and is now setting all the taxation amounts and is chronically underfunding some elements of the school system. Interesting. I wouldn't have done it that way, but that's where we are.
Was there any similar slates at the council level?
Nothing formally. I begged Naheed to do it. I begged Naheed to do a slate. Couple of reasons. I mean, we still don't have secondary suite approval in Alberta or in Calgary. We have these things, these marathon meetings where 22 secondary suites will come forward, and you'll learn about. Yesterday was in the newspaper. A couple, and they had to essentially write out all of the medical problems that this woman has had, and why they need to be able to rent out their fucking basement. And we've always approached secondary suites as a left-wing argument. It's actually a right-wing argument. What the fuck is the government doing telling me how to use my house? If I want to have my basement as a pickling factory, I can hold, I'll do that. And everybody, you put a kitchen down in the basement for pickling or sausage making or whatever, no problem. Put a bedroom in a kitchen and you're screwed. It's stupid. It's wrong. And the government needs to get out of the way of it. But this is the way the city government is working, and now we've got because we didn't run a slate, we didn't have the ground game to support Naheed, and we didn't have the ability to push for ideas that would have really made a difference.
That was about the depth of my knowledge. Is Naheed almost didn't win, but
yeah, but so I'll do another riff. Why does someone almost lose? Right? There's a lesson there. Right? Were his policies wrong? Probably not. I mean, sure, taxes are too high. Taxes are too high everywhere. We have to recognize the impact that we're having on the people. Right now, celebrities are getting elected. And Naheed Nenshi was one of Canada's, not first celebrities, but he certainly was a big celebrity. Right? I mean, everybody lost their minds because Rob Ford, Naheed Nenshi, switched at birth, and one's running Calgary and one's running Toronto, and it's all wrong. And he became a celebrity. And he'd won with 40% of the vote, like 39% of the vote. It was not universal. But then because of this, he took off, became super popular.
Well, he saved the city from the flood.
Saved them single-handedly, standing in front of the floodwaters and saying, "No, thou shalt not go there." He was good. Even right after the flood, he won with the lowest percentage of re-election of an incumbent mayor since Ross Alger in 1980. So he still had problems, but we're not learning from them. And the way that celebrity works, and I said this to my friend Kent Hare, who's the Minister of Sport and Disability. Justin Trudeau was elected on celebrity. Naheed Nenshi was elected on celebrity. The path of celebrity is the one that Kevin Spacey just went on. You are a star. You are a god. We love you. We love you. We love you. We love you. Fuck you. Fuck you. Fuck you. We hate you. We hate you. We hate everything you stand for. We do not want you gracing our screens anymore. That is the nature of celebrity, right? We love the American Idol contestant who wins, and we forget them by September. Is it still a thing? I don't know.
I have no idea.
We know the Super Bowl score the day after the Super Bowl. We know who won the World Series today.
Dodgers.
Well, I don't.
Not the Dodgers. Astros.
The other guys, the other ones. Yeah, okay, we're geeky, so we don't know that. But most of us do know these things. And the problem is that celebrities are disposable. And so the politician who chooses to run as a celebrity is making a conscious choice that at some point they will most likely be celebrity dust because they have been moved on by the population.
Well, we haven't really taught federal politics tonight, but since you brought it up, is the shine gone from Trudeau, and can he rework the 2015 magic going forward?
This Marneau stuff is really dragging. And I think that I honestly thought that my friend Scott Bryson would be finance minister by now. I'm a little surprised that we haven't seen a move. Maybe by the time you guys publish this thing, it's going to be a two-parter by the time we're done talking too. It's getting long, but I think that it's hurting him because you can't be the champion in the middle class and the champion of the wealthy. Now, most people see themselves, even when they're wealthy, as the middle class. But the middle class resents wealth, and they resent the fact that wealth figures out how to get out of taxes. Marneau has been a hypocrite, period. And then the The conflict of interest stuff. I mean, oh man, that's just like cut after cut. Like it's just bleeding everywhere. And first rule of politics is you got to stop the bleeding. So when they put him out for an apology, that was supposed to stop the bleeding, and he's done all these other steps, and it's not stopped the bleeding. And pretty soon, it's not going to be Morneau that we're angry with. Pretty soon, we're going to be angry with Trudeau. And that's going to really change things. And now he's the oldest of the leaders, right? And he's not the most handsome of the leaders, so says my wife, who's like in love with Jagmeet Singh. What happened there?
I was going to say, out of the three, I have a guess at who she would enjoy more.
Well, not Andrew Scheer.
Yeah.
You know, she's got me as a husband. She doesn't need Andrew Scheer. But, you know, these guys, I mean, when we as politicians choose to tread upon the land of celebrity, it really does get tricky. And Morneau is costing Trudeau. Now, I think that the celebrity will overcome this first setback. But I would chop off this limb now. All right, this is no longer something you put a Band-Aid on.
Well, so on the other side, if they're not able to stop the bleeding, you have the more celebrity-focused Jagmeet Singh in the NDP, or the Harper 2.0. Yeah, the Harper 2.0. Harper with a smile. And Andrew Scheer.
Not as smart.
Yeah. Who do you think's
like
got the
dumb Harper?
Yeah, who's got the upper hand?
Harper. I don't know how it ends. I mean, I don't like getting into the prediction game. My work on the Strategists has proven that me predicting is stupid. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'd give myself a D on predictions. So I think that our best bet is to walk past that and instead say, let's just be clear that the election is not determined, right? So that we'll elect Andrew Scheer and it won't matter because he'll never get elected prime minister anyways. Kind of camp that voted for him. They're going to find themselves mistaken. This is a problem that anybody can get elected. Anybody. I mean, even, I guess in some sort of weird circumstance, the NDP, although I really doubt that. But they could be very important when the election is held.
Do you think Jagmeet Singh's been smart at not taking a seat and to use his celebrity to try to build grassroots support? Or would he be better in the House?
I don't think anybody's ever better in the House. We had one of the best performers in the House in Thomas Mulcair, and no one gave a fuck. Right? GAF of 0. GAF stands for give a fuck factor for those who don't follow the podcast that I used to be on. But the House, you know, Thomas Mulcair, arguably the best performer in the House in the last decade. Didn't matter. Sucked in Gen Pop. Jagmeet Singh, you know, he looks good. I come home, my wife's watching a how he wraps his hair video. I don't understand it. I don't ask questions. She seems very excited. I just move past it, right? She's not an NDP supporter.
Yeah.
She's not. She's interested in him. And he's interesting to her. That's going to make this election far more difficult to predict. The more he stays out of the parliament, the more likely I think he's going to be successful, because we within our bubble think that the legislature matters, right? You talk to a provincial legislator. And they'll say, oh, I had a good day in question period today. Oh, I really had him on the run. Did you? No one cared.
We also think policy matters, but...
Policy does to a degree. I mean, there's two things with policy. First of all, simplifying it to the place where most people understand it matters. Right? We were able to take primary care and simplify it to the place where people understood it. Which is tough, because primary care is a tricky little devil to simplify. But then the second is actually having the balls to do what needs to be done and then explain it afterwards. I'm really getting to the camp of just fuck it. Don't explain it. Just do it. And let the opposition lose their minds. Everybody assumes that they're losing their minds anyways. You don't have to do anything for the opposition to lose their minds. So you may as well do something, right? And go for it. I mean, I think if I were to get a party elected again, my first year in office would be a legislative palooza. It would be fantastic. We'd do all the things that we think need to be done in our systems.
Yeah, I think Notley's best months were her first few, when it was
she
just
pissed
bill
it all
after
away.
bill after bill. But she's getting a rehash right now can put some stuff out there that makes Kenny mad, and then when he gets mad at things like GSA bills.
You know what, though? Can I say this?
Yeah, go for it.
I'm a little angry. I'm done. I'm done with GSA bills. I'm done talking about it. I am a supporter. I am an ally. I am on your side. I agree. I think that a teacher revealing to a parent the sexuality of a child who's chosen not to reveal to their parent their sexuality, is abhorrent. But I'm done. There are 1,000 issues, 1,000 million issues out there that we are not dealing with because we are trapped in the land of GSAs. In Alberta, we've been talking about GSA since Laurie Blakeman brought in the legislation. Well, actually, Kent brought it in first, and then Laurie brought it in after. It's been 4 years? 4 years minimum we've been talking about this legislation. Are you kidding me? I'm sorry. It's important. It's important. I agree. It is important. It should be done, and we should be done with it. Let the children do what they do. My daughter's in the GSA at school. Great. I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled that she told me she's in the GSA. But I don't care. You know what I care about? She's having troubles in social studies. Social studies! That's my subject! She's not allowed to have troubles in social studies. Right? That's what I care about. And I want to talk about issues like healthcare, education, post-secondary education, human services, and housing. Why aren't we? Right? Why aren't we? We're talking about GSAs? Why are we not talking about putting a toll on our ring roads? Right? Why are we letting the NDP get away with taking the toll off of your bridges? It's ridiculous.
They brought in a road pricing commission, and
we'll hear about
its
it
own
a year
thing.
from
But
now.
everything has now gone to a task force in BC. We have
I'm really looking
we have
forward to-
8 to 10 task force. So in a year,
was it the ICBC task force that was?
There's a task force for the George Massey Bridge replacement.
You know what it's
that
saying?
They're not doing.
We don't know though what the fuck we're doing.
They put a task force in to
You know what a task
replace
force
MSP.
is called?
Yeah.
Cabinet. Cabinet. The priorities committee. That's your task force.
Well, and they put
Get it done.
They put task force in for things like getting rid of MSPs, which is just a matter of raising another tax or taking the deficit.
You know what I would do?
Those are the only two options.
You want to hear my best worst idea on taxes?
Raise them.
No, this is my best worst idea. Yeah, raise them to a degree, but take your income tax and turn it into a healthcare premium, so that every penny that we raise in the income tax goes to healthcare, every single penny. And then when we increase healthcare spending, we have to increase your income tax, but we allow for things like deductions for your gym membership, your deductions for walking to work. We'll give you a deduction for, I don't know, combing your hair right, brushing your teeth. I'll give you a deduction. But right now, there is nothing that is linked to healthcare spending. And healthcare spending is growing at an astronomical rate, and we cannot get enough money to pay for it. And if we paid for it using income taxes, then at the very least, people would know how much it costs. Because right now, if I turned your income taxes into it, then the number one complaint I get with this idea, how would we pay for the rest of government? People actually think that their income taxes, which is like one of the largest blocks of funding for any government, is enough to pay for healthcare. They are absolutely shocked to find out that healthcare spending exceeds income taxes in every province except, I think, Quebec. Direct them. Tell people that this is where your money's going, because right now this disconnect of not knowing where your money's going is destroying our systems. We don't understand where the money goes. There's another rant. What is that, 13 rants?
Yeah. Well, I think I'm tapped out, and I think we've gone
What
on
is it,
for tons.
4 hours?
It's been an hour, just over.
4 hours. You're going to have to turn this into a two-parter.
You should give yourself a plug. Where can people find you? All that kind of stuff.
Well, they can find me at Carter_AB on Twitter. They can find me on Facebook, but why would you? And then basically, just tweet at me and DM me if you're interested in chatting. You're not, so I understand.
Thanks for it.
Thank you. And that has been Politicos. Find links to the stories we mentioned in the show notes at politicos.ca. Make sure to subscribe if you listen to the podcast and follow us on Facebook and Twitter at PoliticosPod. Leave us a review and let us know what you think. Support the show and get early access to our interviews at patreon.com/Politicos. And if you have ideas for the show, feel free to send them to us. Thanks for listening.